Chapter 3. I took on Chief's role. I didn't like it. My place was offering suggestions from the rear, not the vanguard. But we all had our roles to play. Our westward march halted immediately, and I turned us to Maera's mountains. They were Fiel territory, but that wasn't an issue. The vast majority of the peaks were uninhabited, with only a single trade route marking the passage between northern continent and southern. That pass was back east, just north of Timewinders. The Fielians didn't enter the mountains because of an old legend that an ancient evil roamed the peaks, looking for travelers to devour. It protected an ancient holy site and forbade travelers from entering. Only those with Fielian royal blood could travel uninhibited. I thought it was a rumor to discourage migration. The Felians were particular with their populace, and they rarely accepted foreigners as citizens. They needn't have worried. The mountains were white fire to climb, even without a children's tale to scare us. There was no merit to the tale, and their loss was our gain. No one would look for us there. We hunted wolves and bears to clothe ourselves in furs. The undulates were cold at the best of times, but the mountains seemed to be made of ice themselves. I didn't want to run from the flames of Ophelia's bandit hunters to die in a freezer of wind and stone. Even with all of us covered from head to toe, the gale tore through our clothes like a shepherd shears through wool as we made our way up the rocky terrain.
How far into these things are we going to go?
Tokka's teeth chattered. As far as we need to get away.
We're far enough, don't you think?
Not quite. They weren't happy with me, and the threat of mutiny loomed over my head. I didn't command the same respect as Chief. The men liked me well enough, but that could only take me so far. Just when they were about to snap, we came across an odd sight. A valley in the mountains populated with trees and grass, bees and honey, an old castle and a lake. "This is where we're staying," Lookout announced. He'd been the most vocal of the dissenting voices, and he'd gained quite the following. I told the men it wasn't smart to settle in a fertile valley. Looker backed me, as did Brimshaw, Rickabin, and a handful of others. It wasn't enough, and we were outvoted. I convinced them to set up in the decrepit castle in the valley as a semi-defensible position. The inside was as comfy as the outside looked. The floor poked into our backs, while the scent of mold filled our noses. A cave-in the second day convinced us to erect support beams. Once we were sure there wouldn't be further incidents, I allowed myself to relax a little. The waiting game began. The men played cards. When they bored of that, they wrestled. I searched for ways to set up a watch in case Chief came back, or worse, Ophelia's guards. Unfortunately, the blizzard outside our valley was unceasing and made detecting an approach impossible. On the rare occasion the sleet stopped, grey clouds descended and covered the valley in dense fog. I gave up on any hope of a forewarning. While they played games and idled away their time, I explored. From the northernmost point to the southernmost point of the valley, it was about 200 yards, and from east to west, it was 600. The castle stood near the northwestern edge, and a cave sat behind it. A large pile of rocks stood from bottom to top within, evidence of a cave-in. Nothing else of note existed inside. I searched the basement of the castle. I found rooms with moth-eaten scrolls. Some fragments remained, written in a language I didn't understand. It looked like ancient Fielian, but the syntax made no sense and came out to gibberish. I transcribed it anyways. There was sure to be some intrepid explorer who would pay good money for a guide to this place. Months went by. I found hemavine, a plant commonly used to treat women's plague or to help with injuries we might have sustained. Our supply was always low. Fights had broken out, and our stock had been used to fix broken noses. Some disappeared from our stock nearly every month as well. Rumours had spread among the men that there was a woman amongst our ranks in disguise. None of them found any evidence, aside from the vanishing Hemmervine. The men itched to leave. I reminded them we'd chosen to stay here. Some argued Chief was dead already. Looker was quick to point out we could all still feel him through our forgings. A few others pointed out that meant he hadn't found a forger yet, and it would be best to move. Another vote was cast to leave, and this time, reason won out. If Ophelia's men hadn't found us by now, they weren't going to. The constant blizzard was like a giant wall of protection. We'd been lucky to stumble upon the valley, and we would have frozen to death if we hadn't sought shelter here. I hated to admit it, but Lookout had been right the first time. Almost, I believed in Providence. I dispelled the thought. Of all the men and women created by the Four, we were the most undeserving. We would not be taken to paradise beyond the veil of death, as most of their creations would. All that awaited us was a shallow grave and a black curtain, permanently draped over our senses for eternity. Yet, that was the fate we'd all chosen. If a dark and empty void was all we had to look forward to, we would enjoy our lives here to the fullest. Another month passed. Tasteless and Tocker grew sick. Then Hops. I fell ill as well. Brimshaw and Rickabin investigated for poison, but came up empty. Accusations abounded until Lookout discovered someone had bathed in the lake nearby. Our supply of beer and mead had dried up, and it was the only source of water available. Shinsplint confessed. I was too weak from fever to stop the men from giving him a beating, and he joined the rest of us in the makeshift infirmary. I yearned for Archmace. He'd been the only one with healing Imperia. He must have been tortured mad by Ophelia's handlers. Healers were very hard to kill, and even though Archmace's taste in women was suspect, he was loyal. It would have taken weeks of tickling knives and hot irons to get Chief's location past his lips. We recovered from the sickness and set a guard on the spring. Shinsplint wasn't allowed to help. Finally, we felt it. Chief, forged to each of our souls and each of us to his, had his chains broken. Most people don't understand the nature of forging, mostly because they will never encounter an Imperial forger. When two souls are forged, they are forever linked by an immaterial connection that stretches across time and space like unbreakable twine. The further two linked people, or in some cases objects, become, the thinner the line. The closer, the thicker. But it never breaks unless purposefully snapped by a forger. Another facet that must be understood about forging is that this connection between two persons can be strengthened. The more time you spend with someone, regardless of hate or love, increases the thickness of the binding chain. That means if you have a strong connection and are forged to another, you can enjoy the benefits of being in close proximity over long distances. All this to say, most of us had spent years around Chief. His presence was as familiar to us as a mother's is to a child. His forging broke like a twig snapping in a quiet clearing. Not loud, not overpowering, but distinct and frightening. We celebrated that night. Chief having his forgings to us severed meant he had locked into our location and would be returning soon. Our life living in the small mountain valley would come to an end, and we would resume our lives on the undulates. How wrong we were. Moke paid the closest attention to his bond with Chief and carefully marked where our leader travelled during our stay in the valley. At the moment of severing, Chief had been in Ragnapol, at least according to Moke's best guess. We pulled out our old maps. The City of Wanderers was at least a 300-mile journey far to the south. Questions abounded. Why would Chief travel so far away? Why hadn't he stopped in Floodmesa? Each proposed answer was as unlikely or disheartening as the prior. Our joy at impending liberation quickly turned sour. We didn't have enough supplies to last the month-and-a-half journey it would take Chief to come back. Insults were hurled. The men threatened to mutiny. I calmed them with honeyed words and false promises. In our packs were some seeds we could plant. It wouldn't be much, but it would be something. If I'd wanted to farm, I'd have been a farmer. Lookout sneered. If you want to starve, don't plant the seeds. I countered. He'd been the biggest dissident. My patience for him was stressed to snapping, even during our peaceful lulls. With the threat of hunger and starvation around the nearest corner, I no longer had the ability to indulge his quirks. Ears, Brimshaw, and Rickabin formed a hunting party. The rest of us scoured the abandoned castle and found a hidden room with more seeds to plant, a barrel of salt, and a few jams and jellies that were preserved enough to eat. I made a schedule for rations and guarded them myself. I didn't trust anyone else. Tasteless was tasked with watching our new garden, while everyone took turns to cultivate and water the plants. The hunting party returned with 3 rams, 2 adults and a kid. They were stripped and hung for jerky, which were added to the food supply. For a while, we were honest men doing honest labor. I overheard Tocker speaking with Looker about how this would be the perfect place to start a new village away from everything. I silently agreed. There was a peace here we'd never felt before. Looker was quick to point out you need women to start a village. Who would be stupid enough to marry one of us? Tocker dropped the point. Remarkably, the seeds we took from the castle germinated faster than the ones we'd brought. Within a week, we had large vegetables, orange in colour, sprouting from the ground. One was enough to feed a man for an entire week, and we'd grown over 2 dozen. The taste left something to be desired, but we were happy to exchange delectability for full stomachs. Ears, Brimshaw, and Rickabin went on a second hunt. Tasteless was convinced some fresh meat would pair perfectly well with the orange vegetable, and we were all willing to try a new recipe. We planted more of the strange plant, and it grew just as quickly as before. The hunting party didn't return. Lookout went looking, but all he returned with were a pair of bloodied shoes that belonged to Rickabin.
Something's out there.
Looker made a panic in front of everyone. It's probably a bear, I said, but even I was unnerved. There should have been something more to bring back. Some bones, other scraps of material, but just shoes.
If we find it, we can kill it and cook it.
Tasteless dragged a finger across the bloodied shoes and touched his tongue. We all recoiled. Tasteless made a face.
Bleh! Maybe not. It tastes like sulphur.
Maybe the meat tastes different, Shinsplint suggested. I'm telling you, it's not a bear. Lookout huffed. These mountains are weird. I can feel it with my Imperia. What's weird about them? I asked. I would have normally ignored Lookout. He told all tales for attention, but I would have been lying if I said I hadn't felt something strange too. The legend the Fielians told came to mind. I dismissed the thought. The valley was tranquil, harmonious, peaceful. I reasoned that nothing evil could touch this place. But in the night, or when I was on my lonesome, it felt like the peace of the dead rather than the living. Lookout hemmed and hawed and tried to deflect from the question. I pressed. He still refused. None of you will believe me. Spit it out, Nancy boy. I grew exasperated. Stop giving us the runaround. We already think you're nuts, Looker said.
You have to be part of this team,
Tasteless commented. Lookout drew himself up, offended, before he finally broke. There's voices. Voices? We asked unanimously. He stomped the ground. It's like the rock has voices in it. They're always whispering and talking to each other. If Ears was here, he'd tell you. Ears had been the other elementalist. It sounded like an old wives' tale. We asked for more details, but he couldn't give any. All he said was that the mountains were alive. He couldn't tell if they were happy or sad, angry or vengeful, just that they spoke in a language he couldn't understand. Most of the crew fell asleep that night laughing. I would have too, except I was reminded of a story passed down from ancient times that chased away sleep. I laid wide awake long into the night, before curiosity finally overpowered me. I left my sleeping sack and the rations behind. The star stream hung over me, halfway covering the night sky, visible on the rare cloudless night here in the mountains. It illuminated the entire valley as I left the castle and trudged into the cave. I could have picked anywhere to go, really, but inside the mountain seemed best. I couldn't say why. Maybe I subconsciously heard the rocks calling to me. A rock slide within barred any deeper progress. I was sure the cave went further, but I didn't need to see anything more. It was just a cave. Just a rock carved out by animals or wind or water, or all three combined. I'd lived in enough to know there was nothing exciting inside, and if there was, it wasn't something to mess with. I knelt on the ground and placed my palm on the stone. Gold light trailed from my fingertips and sunk deep into the rock, and I was transported away. Memorists like myself were not limited to reading the memories of people. We could read the memories of animals and objects as well. Each spoke a different language. Learning to see as paper saw, or trees, or goats, or cows could take years of practice. Most memorists that dealt in the study of the inanimate spent a lifetime learning how to discern the way different objects spoke and thought. I'd been lucky enough to have the technique to speak and hear from stone passed down to me. It was the oldest and most unmoving of all things. Reading memories of objects can also be difficult. There is no direction. Sometimes the images flood in all at once. At other times, you have to pick through dross to find what you're looking for. In this case, it was the former. Everything the mountain had ever experienced or known came to me in a single overwhelming instant. And by the four, the abyss and the star stream above, did this mountain have stories to tell. Another facet of reading minds to consider is that of the robustness of one's soul. A soul that is frayed and thin is an indicator of degradation or abuse. A soul that is full and without holes is an indicator of joy and a long-lived life. I was swept away in the information that assailed me. The mountain wasn't just long-lived, it was the oldest creation on the face of Biermond. It had been here for millions, nay, billions of years. It had been the first to pierce the veil separating ocean and sky, and it had watched as the waters receded from the land below it. A guiding, creative hand had directed its growth. A light brighter than I could describe filled my mind. The details are indistinct. I was aware of 4 separate people. They carved out the very cave I stood in and left something behind. Why or what they left, I couldn't say. As I read the memory of the mountain, I was aware of them watching me in the present from the past. I cannot say for certain, but I am sure it was the 4, the gods of creation, and they plucked from my mind that which they did not want me to remember. I could not turn away, though I dearly wished to. Merely seeing a memory of them was enough to make me cower and realize how filthy I was. If they were wool, I was thick, greasy oil. It was like standing naked before an entire city, magnified infinitely for everyone to see. The shame was unbearable. The moment passed. The 4 figures departed. I almost lost control of my Imperia, but at the last moment I clung to the memories of the mountain. Ages passed. Few visited this valley, fewer knew of its existence. There were no animals to speak of that dare make their home here. The gap between past and present narrowed. The mountain remembered much, but stone could not measure time. It only knew that ages had passed. I was privileged to see the 10 champions of legend visit the cave. 4 more visited later, among them the first king of Fiel, and they were the last before my band. I saw myself enter the valley with my fellows, dark, grimy. This was a sacred place, and we'd desecrated it with our presence. The mountain itself rumbled with anger, yet it could not harm us, not while we remained. So it had summoned, through means I didn't understand, something else to remove the invaders. It approached the valley, ancient, hateful. I couldn't see its full form, but I could tell it was something we could not fight. Nothing more could be read from the mountain. I let go of my Imperia, and the vision ended. I collapsed in a daze. I tried to move. My body wouldn't obey. I closed my eyes. When I woke, my skin was as ice and my mind addled. It took me ages to simply roll over, and I slept again. I dreamed. I saw all the women I'd kidnapped over the years. I saw all the men and children I'd killed. There were hundreds surrounding me in a circle with their fingers pointed at me. I had nowhere to run. I screamed they would have done the same if they stood in my place, but my own soul snatched the sound from my voice. All was silent, but their eyes accused louder than the quiet, without a hint of vindication. I woke the second time. I can't say I was surprised. The dream had seemed to last an eternity, and I'd been halfway convinced I'd died and been sent to purgatory. Not a place of fire or wailing or torture, just silence and my sins for company. I laid there for a long time. I could have risen if I wanted, but my dream, rather nightmare, weighed heavy. I battled within myself. I tried to rationalize it away. In the end, I couldn't deny what I had seen. Almost surely it was a personal prophecy. Only God-spoken soul-seers were blessed with the gift of foresight, the ability to glimpse fragments of the future, and even then it was a rare gift. Something about this place, something about this cavern, had temporarily given that ability to me. If I changed nothing, that terror was what awaited me.